Well, the Lib Dem leader, Sir Ed Davey, today called on the government to get tough if Trump hits the UK with tariffs. I spoke to him a little earlier today.
I think it's a really worrying development. Just the threat can have an impact on confidence and investment. And we've got to be very strong against this. We need to work within the UK. Liberal Democrats have called for a summit of the four nations, so all the nations, devolved governments can work together. And I think we need to work together with our Commonwealth colleagues, especially Canada, who are on the front line on this, and our European colleagues, and indeed colleagues in Asia. This is bad for the world economy. And even though we don't export a huge amount of steel to the United States, it still affects jobs here. But the ripple effect across the world economy is really alarming.
So you're basically saying we should work more closely, talk more to other countries around the world. But I guess the problem is, some might say, we don't live in this kind of Lib Dem cuddly world. The Donald Trump world is dog eat dog. Mexico, Canada, the EU, China, all these guys are going to be looking after their own skills, right?
I don't see it as a cuddly world at all. Liberal Democrats are trying to be realistic. I think what I see from other political parties in the UK, including the government, is they're being too weak. You're right, Donald Trump only responds to strength, and he needs to see that other countries are working together and are going to take him on and not going to stand meekly by. If you read his book, The Art of the Deal, he says if he sees weakness or he sees desperation, then he'll walk all over the other guy, as he says. And I'm afraid whether it's Conservatives or Reform or indeed our own government, they're just looking too weak. And unless you seek international cooperation and make it clear that you're not going to accept this or roll over, I think he will pursue these tariffs, and that would be so damaging to the UK.
So do you think we should retaliate? Do you think we should put our own tariffs on some American imports?
Well, retaliation should not be off the table. We should be ready to do that. I mean, first of all, we need to persuade him not to proceed. We saw with his other threats for tariffs on Canada and Mexico that he pulled out. He claimed he won a victory, but he hadn't won anything at all. So he may back down. But that's why I think we need to be very strong and clear that we will resist this. So all options should be on the table, frankly.
Do you think that the UK government's been, I guess, a bit naive when it comes to Trump and tariffs, like thinking, oh, maybe they're not going to put tariffs on us? It's a bit like, being at the back of the class, hoping you don't get picked on.
Well, I think what people need to appreciate is tariffs on any country around the world will have an impact on us. Just because he doesn't put tariffs on the UK in any future situation doesn't mean that tariffs he puts on Canada or China or the EU or anywhere else isn't going to impact the cost of living in our country, and it's so challenging for people at the moment, or indeed the prospects for growth. And we need growth desperately, so we have the money to invest in our NHS and our schools and so on. So whatever he does, if he's going to undermine the world economy, that's bad for us, whether or not there are direct tariffs on this country. And so the government needs to recognise that a little bit more and needs to stand up for what's the right thing to do, not just with respect to the UK and the US, but for the world economy.
You mentioned growth there, and obviously a big part of the Lib Dem plan for growth is to rejoin the customs union with the EU. That would mean paying more into the EU pot. It would mean not being able to strike independent trade deals. It would also mean potentially accepting rulings from the European Court as well. Is that a price worth paying then?
Well, the Liberal Democrats believe the UK should negotiate a customs union with the EU by the end of this decade because it would boost growth, it would reduce prices, it would take down all these awful trade barriers that the Conservatives put up and agreed to, which are hitting our small and medium-sized enterprises.
I guess, the compromises of it. Do you think those are things that are worth paying for the increase growth?
There may be a few trade-offs, and I'm happy to deal with those, but there's no doubt that overall it's hugely beneficial to our economy and to our business and to growth, and that's the key judgment you have to make.
I mean, you'd kiss goodbye to a US-UK trade deal, right?
Well, first of all, I don't think a US-UK trade deal is on the cards, and even if it was in goods, I'd probably be against it. I'll tell you why. The Americans and Donald Trump wants the US farmers to be able to undercut our farmers on environmental standards, on food quality. We don't want that. The Conservatives sold out British farmers with the deals to Australia and New Zealand. We don't want that again. He also, I imagine, would like American private healthcare to enter our health market and undermine our NHS. We don't want that. Now, there may be room for a US-UK trade deal on services. We could look at that, but we have to make sure it's in our interests. And the truth is, the trade deals that the Conservatives struck after we left the EU, the vast majority were just rollovers of what we'd already got.
Okay.
They achieved nothing. Let's get back working with our European colleagues, get down those trade barriers.